All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. Good evening and welcome everybody. Can people hear me fine? Great. Well, thank you again for joining us. And just as a heads up, this meeting is being recorded. It will be posted on the project website so that the meeting is available to anybody who wants to reference it at a later time. We will also upload all the slides that you see today and welcome any further discussions beyond the meeting as well. I will go ahead and share my screen and do some introductions to get us started. Can folks see my screen? Great. Let's see. All right, so my name is Atul Sharma. I'm an assistant to the Deputy Director of Planning. We welcome everybody to this evening meeting. Thank you for making the time to be with us. I'm joined today by two of my colleagues, Grace Bogdan, who is a development review specialist within our Down County planning team, and Lu-Wei Wong, who is a planner within our director's office. So today's purpose is to share with you the draft recommendations for updating a policy that the planning department has, which is currently called the Public Benefit Point System. And so we have about 90 minutes scheduled for this meeting. We have a lot of information to share with you, but we will hope to get through it in the first hour. So we have at least 30 minutes at the back end for you to ask any questions and engage in a discussion. We will share with you an overview of the project. We did a lot of great analysis of the existing policy, so we'll share with you a summary of that analysis. And then we'll dive into the draft recommendations that we are proposing to update this policy, which includes the overall approach for the policy, how we recommend this policy be applied to each of the 4 zones that it currently covers, and then diving into detailed public benefits and how we recommend applying this new updated system to development projects. Right on the outset, I'd like to say that we've done a variety of engagement strategies for this project because we wanted to get to as many stakeholders as possible. We set up an internal working group of planning staff and parks department staff to share the perspective of the people who implement this policy on a day-to-day basis. We also set up a technical working group that included representatives of the design and development community, land use attorneys, real estate experts, engineers, as well as members of various county agencies and representation from the county executive's office and council staff. We also had a lot of opening conversations and continued dialogue with small groups that we think would be interested and impacted by the changes to this policy. This included minority group representatives, advocacy groups and nonprofits, as well as industry groups like MBIA, etc. And then last but certainly not the least, we are hosting these open houses. Today is the second of 2 open houses where we invite anybody who is interested in the policy and the changes we are proposing to it to come and learn about the program, ask questions, etc. And I will say we have a pretty great website that we created for this project, where we also included a lot of great data that we collected about what type of public benefits we have received to date. And all that will be available through a link that we will put in the chat before the end of the meeting. Where we are in the planning process, this is an update to a technical study. And once we are done with today's open house, we will sort of shift our focus to going to the planning board through various working sessions in June. These working sessions will be open for public testimony. So if you have any input you would like to share with the planning board, we welcome you to attend those technical working sessions and share your input. Those are scheduled for June 6th, 13th, and the 20th. And there's another one if we need a 4th one on July 25th. After the planning board reviews this, we will request that the planning board approve the recommendations to be transmitted to county council for their review in the fall. And once the council reviews and approves a version of these updates, we will then get to the work of writing up the technical documents like a zoning text amendment, which would amend the various parts of the county code to make this new version of the policy implementable. And then we will also create a new implementation guidelines document that can be used by anybody aiming to utilize this policy and where it applies. And following that, we will transition to the new system over time. We will probably create some sort of an opt-in period where developments and applicants can choose to either come in under the current policy or the new proposed changes. We haven't fully decided what that opt-in period looks like, but we will be certain to share that with the board as well and get their opinions on that. So we're going to start off by giving everybody a broad overview of the policy. This might be old news to some of you, but it might be completely new information to others. So we wanted to start by setting sort of an even table for everybody to start hearing about the policy. And there are a few technical terms that we will use repeatedly. So I'm going to turn to Grace to explain a few of the technical jargon that we unfortunately have to use in these meetings to convey these complicated planning topics.
Thanks, Atul, and good evening, everyone. So floor area ratio, this is the first one. We most commonly use it as its acronym, FAR. And so essentially what this is it's an equation. It basically takes the square footage of an existing building or a proposed building, and we divide that by the square footage of the site that it will be placed on. And when you do this equation, it comes out with a whole number, sometimes a whole number and a little change, and that's considered your floor area ratio. When it's applied to a site, it can come in a variety of development scenarios based on other zoning standards. And so on the left side of your screen, where you see 100% lot coverage, 50 and 25, one FAR, or a square footage that comes out of one FAR, can look very different depending on what the zoning regulations are. So on the left side, 100% lot coverage, you could have a certain square footage that would deliver a one-story building. With that same amount of FAR square footage with a requirement of 50% lot coverage, it could turn into a two-story building. And if the zoning requirements limit lot coverage to 25%, that same amount of square footage could result in a four-story building. So in zoning, we use FAR as a zoning tool. We use it in our zoning, you'll hear CR2. And so essentially that's limiting the amount of density on a particular property based on its zone. So on the right side of your screen, you can see the more FAR you apply to a property with the zoning regulations, you can result in going from the lower story buildings to mid-rise to high-rise buildings. Next slide. So in the 4 zones that we're going to discuss tonight that are covered under the existing CR guidelines, there's 2 ways that those properties can develop. The first one is considered a standard method of development, and so that's where we're looking at the lower levels of FAR, and there's a threshold of either 0.5 or 1 FAR. And so if a project is proposing that lower thresholds of FAR, it's considered standard method, and it could come through our process either as a site plan or to building permit. And if it's a site plan, there's certain code requisites that are required, and we'll get into that in a little bit. However, if a property wishes to develop at a higher FAR above that 0.5 or 1 FAR threshold, that would be considered the optional method. And so in the optional method, that's when the CR guidelines come into play, and we're looking for public amenities and public benefits that come in exchange for that higher density of development. Next slide. Okay, so how does this work? How does this apply to a property? On the left side of your screen, you see a series of numbers and letters and all sorts of colors. I'll read it out to you. It's CR 2.0, C1, R 1.5, H60. This is a typical zoning for a property. And so I'll break it down for you. CRT, that is the zone. In this case, it stands for commercial residential town. 2 is the maximum FAR that's allowed within that zone. C stands for commercial, so it's limited to 1 FAR of commercial. R stands for residential, it's limited to 1.5 FAR of residential, and the building height maximum is 60 feet. So when you mesh all of these things together, that's the zoning allowed on the property. And if we wanted to apply the standard method FAR, this property could develop up to 1 FAR in the CRT zone under the standard method, with those code requisites being required through our site plan review process. However, if the property wanted to develop under to its maximum FAR of 2, that would go through the optional method of process, and that's where the CR guidelines would come into play. The CR guidelines have a equation to determine how many public benefits would be required from the certain categories. That's how our existing system works.
Thank you, Grace. So, these 4 zones that Grace has talked about are the commercial residential zone, the commercial residential town zone, the employment office zone, and the life sciences zone. And they're all shown in various colors, and they're applied to different parts of the county. In most areas, they're applied near metro stations and transit. In some places, they're applied where there's a concentration of employment uses or life sciences uses. And the purpose of these zones was to create flexible zoning for promoting mixed-use infill development. And the public benefit policy applies to these 4 zones. And the basis of sort of exchange there is that we allow developments to build to higher densities near transit or in employment clusters. And in return, these projects provide a series of benefits that benefit the project itself, but also the neighborhoods around it. So that's the basis of the exchange. The point system is essentially a way for us to review the adequacy of the public benefits being provided with an optional method project. This is a menu-based approach on purpose because we wanted to make sure that the menu was predictable and transparent. And by using a menu, we aim to streamline the review of development applications because everybody knows what is to be expected in terms of public benefits. Interestingly, this policy has really evolved and changed in the past 14 years. It was initially created only for the CR zone and only for the 2010 White Flint Sector Plan. Over time, it was applied to other zones, including CRT, LSC, and EOF, and has been applied to different parts of the county ever since. And however, with that evolution, this policy has not benefited from a comprehensive update. Most of the public benefits that you see today have been in place in the same shape or form since 2010. And as we all know, since 2010, the world has changed in both subtle and dramatic ways. The way we do real estate development, what the market for different types of uses is, residential, office, that has changed a lot. Construction codes have evolved. Energy performance measures have changed. Demand for retail has changed. Demand for office has changed. So lots of changes have occurred in the past 14 years, but the way we sort of define public benefits has more or less stayed the same. So we think it is important to sort of relook at these public benefits. Also, in the past 5 years, the county has passed some really important legislative plans and actions. For example, in 2019, we passed the Racial Equity and Social Justice Act. In 2021, we passed the Climate Action Plan, which set some very ambitious targets to eliminate greenhouse gas emissions by 2035. And in 2022, we made a major comprehensive update to the county's general plan, Thrive Montgomery 2050, which sets a vision for growth in the county for the next 30 years. And if these were not big enough changes, we went through a global pandemic in 2020, which really upended the real estate industry in so many ways. So given all this, we think it was an opportune time for us to really comprehensively review this policy and propose some significant but meaningful changes. And we are trying to do that by identifying best practices that ensure a balance between the public benefits that are required, the cost of development and providing those public benefits, and importantly, alignment with county goals, especially goals that have been outlined in Thrive Montgomery 2050, the Climate Action Plan, and guidance from the Racial Equity and Social Justice Act. We're now going to sort of give you an overview of all the analysis that we did. We spent several months doing deep analysis of various aspects of the policy. When this policy was created in itself, it was a nationally recognized policy. And so we evaluated every aspect of it, from its theoretical underpinnings and financial assumptions to the experience of implementing this policy from the users that use it, both within our planning department and beyond. We undertook a range of quantitative and qualitative analysis. We looked at financial feasibility of providing these public benefits. And we also compared the policy to regional and national peers to see how others were doing similar practices. And then we distilled all that into objective data-driven takeaways, and we've recommending these updates to the policy based on those takeaways. So here is a list of all the things we did. We looked at development activity to date, the quality of implementation guidelines, as I mentioned, the financial feasibility and benchmarking, and also looking at how others regulate incentive density. And what we learned at a high level was these 6 things. One, that there's been very uneven development activity within the optional method of development that requires public benefits across the 4 zones. And as Louis will share with you shortly, most of that activity, almost 98% of those projects, have been in just the CR and CRT zones. We also realized that the point system we have as a county is really expansive and bigger than any other jurisdiction that we compared ourselves to. And that may not be the best thing, because most successful programs in today's times have a much more focused and sort of strategically considered menu of public benefits that aligns with some key policy goals that that jurisdiction is trying to achieve. Even though we have a big menu, we also realized that we were getting a subset of those 36 public benefits over and over again in optional method projects, and we have the data to show that as well. We also found that considerations of cost and feasibility were considered, but they did not become a defining feature of the system, which is very different from a proffer state system like Virginia's, where everything is based on dollars and cents, and developments have to make financial contributions in order to earn the zoning that they're requesting for. One of the things that really jumped out to us during that analysis was also that we are unique in using a point system to facilitate this exchange between a request for additional density and public benefits. Other jurisdictions do this in a much more direct way, where they evaluate public benefits in terms of FAR, since the request from a development application is to approve FAR. So we've taken a good lesson from that, and we'll share some recommendations around that. And last but not the least, as I mentioned before, we absolutely need a stronger alignment between this policy and updated county goals as outlined in Thrive and the Climate Action Plan. So I'm going to turn to Louis, who's going to share a little bit about the uneven development activity across the 4 zones.
Thanks, Atul. So between 2010 and 2022, the Planning Board approved 65 sketch plans associated with 67 approved set plans. So let's take a look at the pie chart to your right. So of the 67 project approvals, most of development activities are covered by CR and CRT, with 53 approvals in CR and 30 approvals in CRT, whereas EOF accounts for only 2%, equivalent to 1 project. So 0 projects happened in LLC. So as Artur said, when this policy is published, it aims to ensure the consistency, and its measures should be implemented across all 4 zones. However, in reality, it exists uneven development activities across all 4 zones.
Thank you, Louis. And as I mentioned, we also did a lot of benchmarking of our policy with regional and national peers. We looked at Austin, we looked at Detroit, we looked at Seattle, because they seem to have similar programs where they allocate higher density approvals in return for public benefits. We also looked regionally as to how our friends in Washington, D.C., Arlington, and Fairfax County do similar programs and how they go about negotiating for public benefits in return for the right to build up to a higher density in a project. One of the things that really struck us was that, as I mentioned, we have a very large menu, but our menu is also not really clearly aligned with some policy objectives. The current menu is really organized under planning-related themes like transportation, design, environment. But when you look at other successful jurisdictions, they really sort of fine-tune such programs to make sure they align with key policy goals. This is a good example from Austin's Downtown Density Bonus Program, where you can get additional FAR for providing public benefits. However, Austin stipulates that 50% of those public benefits come in terms of affordable housing because they have identified affordable housing as a high priority for that city. So we found that where these programs are really successful, they were often tied directly to some key policy outcomes, which is not how our current policy is clearly structured today, and there's room to improve there. And so, you can see our menu here. This is the 36 existing public benefits that we have. And, between them, there are some benefits that compete with each other, like building lot terminations and transfer of development rights are both intended to be for farmland preservation, but one is required and the other one is optional. So we don't get one and we get the other one quite a bit. Similarly, we have some conflicting public benefits on the menu. We incentivize providing less parking, but we also incentivize the provision of public parking. And then there are some benefits that overlap with each other, like, providing architectural elevations and a tower step back, but also being able to get points for exceptional design, which are all intended to get to the same end result.
So we did look, like Atul said previously, around the region. We looked to our friends in Alexandria, in Arlington County and Fairfax County. We looked at what they do. Again, obviously it's a proper system, so it's slightly different, but Washington, D.C. also has a similar process for allowing additional density in the return of certain public benefits and amenities. Next slide. What we found was that because we uniquely apply our zoning in a way where we map the property, we say that you can do this amount of development, and then we do the negotiations for the public benefits afterwards, it really shows that this is one of the weaker systems in the region. While as City of Alexandria and Arlington County all do their negotiations as the density is being considered at the table with their rezoning process.
And there are bigger legal reasons for that. We are a different type of a state legislature than Virginia is. So we recognize that there are some foundational reasons for those differences, but nonetheless, the way a public benefit policy plays out is directly impacted because of those things.
And so the major takeaway here is that a stronger alignment with updated county goals is required. The chart on your screen is, a picture's worth 1,000 words. So the numerous amounts of public benefits our current system allows is lined on the bottom of your screen. There's 36 of them in total. And the red bars show the amount of times those public benefits have been delivered with our optional method projects. The blue bars on the right side of your screen show every time a sector plan is approved, they state which public benefits of the list are a priority in that sector plan. So what we're seeing here is, first off, there's quite a discrepancy between the amount of blue bars that, we say that it's a certain priority in an area, and the amount of red bars. There's really no correlation whether it's a priority, is it actually getting delivered? There's no correlation there. What we're also seeing is that there's a lot of red bars. So there's a lot of red or certain public benefits that are being delivered repeatedly by development, whereas there's certain public benefits that have been rarely delivered or not delivered at all in our public benefit process. And so we took all of this analysis to the planning board in December of 2023, and they gave us some good guidance to moving forward in this phase of the process. And I was first off, simplify the system. Based on our analysis in the region and nationwide, ours is a bit more complicated than others. Does it need to be? Secondly, align the categories with our key county policy goals. So we're looking at housing for all. That's a very big county goal, and environmental resilience with the passing of the climate action plan. We've also heard that the master planners and regulatory reviewers need flexibility when applying this policy in the sector planning process and also in the development review process. So how can we make this more flexible to them? And then lastly, streamline the process where possible. It's covered by 4 zones, but does it need to be? Can we make development as close to by right as possible where it makes sense?
Thank you, Grace. So we'll turn now to, so we've talked about how the basic policy works today, what we learned by analyzing the different aspects of that policy. So now we'll kind of switch gears and talk about what we are recommending in terms of updates to the policy. And at a very high level, essentially, we're trying to achieve 2 things. One, as I mentioned, modernize the policy to bring it up to today's times. This includes looking at construction codes, energy codes, changes in the real estate market, changes in design preferences, et cetera, to make sure that the policy sort of is of today's time. But equally importantly, we want to position this policy in a way so that it becomes a way to move the needle on the key policy goals that we think are the most important. We think this policy could be a really powerful and useful tool to move the needle in achieving things like housing, environment, etc. And we'll show you what those goals are. I will say that all the ideas and recommendations that you'll hear about today are all, we think, objective and driven by project data, research of peer jurisdictions, and financial feasibility analysis. We've really tried to avoid our personal preferences or opinions into this project. We've done a lot of interagency coordination with our Department of Permitting Services, Department of Transportation, Department of Housing and Community Affairs, the Parks Department, the Arts and Humanities Council, et cetera, to make sure that the benefits that we do sort of include in the new version are things that those implementation agencies are able to accept and build and move forward with. We are continuing to maintain a menu-based approach because we think it makes sense. There's no need to reinvent the wheel here. But we are proposing a much more focused set of benefits that aligns with county priorities, and we'll share those in a minute. We're also tailoring recommendations for each of the 4 zones because they've behaved so differently in terms of using this policy in the past 14 years. And in the end, we do want to continue to recognize that transit-oriented development is a desired outcome, but we also want to make sure that the projects that are developing near transit are providing meaningful benefits, not just for the occupants of these buildings, but to the greater community as well. And we do recognize that some of these benefits that we are proposing are indeed required by some other county laws and regulations. And we think that that's okay, that we should really focus as a planning department on the public benefits that are most needed in a community. And even if they're required by some other law, we should continue to incentivize their delivery because they do have a public benefit. So our overall approach is one that aims to simplify the system by reducing the number of public benefit categories and also the number of public benefits. We are trying to make the system more proportional. So going from a points-based evaluation of public benefits to an FAR-based evaluation of public benefits. So projects would have to provide public benefits based on how much FAR they are asking to be approved as a part of the development. This would essentially scale the public benefits with the intensity of development. We want to clarify the policy by making sure everybody knows what the code requisites are and eliminating complicated formulas and complex compliance procedures. And in the end, we also want to make a policy that is highly flexible, where master plans have the ability to adjust the menu of public benefits, and that we incentivize important public benefits, even if they're required by code or by certain other regulations. So what does that look like? So in practice, it will mean that some of the things will continue to be the same, in that we will still have a menu-based approach, and there still will be a standard method of FAR, which will be a lower threshold, and an optional method of FAR. And that for the standard method, projects will just need to meet the code requisites, which Grace will talk about in a second. But if a project chooses to build up to their mapped FAR, or in certain places like Bethesda, where an overlay zone provides even more FAR than the mapped FAR, then that for those portions of the development, projects will have to provide public benefits just as they do today.
Okay, so when we talk about code requisites, for those of you that are on the call familiar with our process, this list looks very familiar to you. But for those of you that are unfamiliar with our process, if a site plan is required by our department, it's an application that we review, and then we make recommendations to the planning board. And we review the application based on requirements of our zoning code, and also through our county agencies that participate in our development review process. So a list of those are on your screen. That includes forest conservation law, the growth and infrastructure policy. So if a project is proposing a certain amount of development, we need to make sure there's adequate public facilities in place for that. Master plan conformance. And so in a given sector plan area, there could be particular streetscape standards for frontage improvements, and open space design guidelines and other environmental recommendations within that plan that we must find master plan conformance with. There's also a complete streets guide, which affects your streetscape and frontage standards. Historic preservation can come into play if there's historic property on the site. Chapter 25A is the housing law. So if you're providing a certain amount of units, you might need to provide affordable housing with that. And then we leave agency approval at the bottom. So there's a number of other agencies that are involved in our process, where there's certain requirements in terms of stormwater, fire access, and our own Department of Permitting Services for zoning and right-of-way permitting. This is an extensive list. We totally get it. These requirements have also become more intense in of their own right over time. And so just doing the standard method of development and a site plan in Montgomery County does come with a lot of review. And the term code requisite is something that we have used in the presentation so far, and it's a term that we're going to continue to use. So we just wanted to make sure we took stock of what that meant, and everybody can be on the same page as to what that means.
Thank you, Grace. So, so now to the exciting part. So what are we recommending? We are essentially suggesting that the category of public benefits be reorganized from the 7 thematic topics we have today to directly align with our most important policy priorities in the county. This means that there is a category of public benefits called Housing for All, which incentivizes the delivery of affordable housing, but also market rate housing. There's a category for environmental resilience, which incentivizes the delivery of green buildings, green sites, high energy performance, amongst other things. That there's a category of public benefits called infrastructure for compact growth, which incentivizes the delivery of pedestrian, cycling, and transit access infrastructure, and also the creation of new streets that create compact blocks for walkable format of development. We think this is really important, as Thrive really places a lot of emphasis on concentrating future growth along corridors in a compact way. Thrive Montgomery 2050 also talks extensively about creating complete communities where people can walk or bike to most of their daily needs and get services that they require every day within a 15-minute walk or a 5-minute bike ride. So this category of public benefits would incentivize things like neighborhood serving retail and services, public art, placemaking, cultural programming, and also the design, high quality design of buildings and green spaces that the community can enjoy. We think all those public benefits really do take into account racial equity and social justice. For example, the provision of affordable housing in high-income areas can really extend the value and the amenities of those neighborhoods to a broader swath of people. Doing green buildings and green sites within our equity focus areas, on the other hand, can improve air quality in those areas, which often happen to be communities of color and minority communities. And providing housing across the income spectrum will make our neighborhoods much more approachable and accessible to a broader part of our citizenry. So under these 4 public benefits, we are proposing that the 36 public benefits be condensed into 13 public benefits. So under housing, you can get public benefit points or FAR for providing affordable housing or family-sized units, as well as providing deeper levels of affordability. Under environmental resilience, there's a public benefit for providing energy-efficient buildings and using renewable energy on site. Doing green buildings through alternative compliance certifications like LEED, and also using green elements on site such as pervious paving, bird-friendly design, etc. Under infrastructure for compact growth, there's a public benefit related to providing off-site improvements that improve pedestrian, cycling, and transit access. For providing public benefits such as bus stops and BRT shelters, amongst other things, as well as creating street grids and extending trail networks. Even when a master plan might have recommendations to do so, if a development comes through and really does provide the highest level of that recommendation, we think it could be incentivized. And under complete communities, we've expanded the previously housed benefit of public art to include art as well as placemaking. We have increased the number of partners applicants can collaborate with to install public art within their project or within the plan area or do cultural programming. We will continue to incentivize neighborhood services and retail within developments because that is such a key element for ensuring that sort of walkable lifestyle that people want when they move to areas near transit. Under great public realm, we will incentivize the delivery of parks and open spaces of different sizes and levels. And under design excellence, we've tried to create an objective list of criteria that a project can tick off the list and ensure that they are providing excellent design for their buildings and sites and be credited for that in terms of FAR. So one might look at this list and say, well, you've really taken away a lot of the public benefits. Will applicants and developers have enough choices to provide public benefits in a way that makes sense for the project? And we thought a lot about this. And so one of the things we did was that for each of these 13 public benefits, we have proposed 4 different tiers of participation. And I'll show you what that means, which really means that for 13 public benefits, there are really 52 ways in which you can provide these public benefits. So using the renewable energy public benefit as an example, you will see that there are 4 tiers of participation under this public benefit. For each tier, you earn, by providing public benefits at each of the tiers, you earn the right to build a certain portion of your optional method FAR up to the mapped FAR. Tier 1 is the so-called least intense public benefit. Tier 2 is a little bit more, but you get more FAR for that. Tier 3 goes yet higher. And Tier 4 is our top tier public benefit, which is so substantial and extensive that we think that if a project provides a Tier 4 public benefit, they should not be expected to provide other public benefits. This is not that different from how the policy works today, where if a project provides, for example, 20% affordable housing units, they don't have to provide other public benefits. We think that concept can be expanded to all the public benefits criteria categories that we've proposed. So you'll see here at Tier 1, a project can earn up to 0.25 FAR of their incentive density, by either utilizing a third of their energy as renewable energy from the regional market or generating it on site. If that commitment goes up to 2/3 of their energy use, they earn the right to build one FAR. If they further that commitment to 3/4 of their energy use, they can earn the right to build up to 1.5 FAR. And if they create a building that generates all its energy on site, which is a very complex and expensive building to build, they can earn all their mapped FAR by providing the public benefit and will not be expected to provide other public benefits. And this is the sort of the same method and rationale that we have come up with for every public benefit. And while we will not go into detail for all 13 public benefits at this level, we will share the slides after the presentation with the attendees, so you have the benefit of reviewing them and giving us your comments. So a project that provides public benefits would essentially have to do two things. One, it would have to provide at least one public benefit from housing or environment, and at least one public benefit from infrastructure and complete communities. We think this is important because projects need to provide public benefits that not only move the needle on these countywide goals, but also deliver things that are needed in the local communities where the master plan is situated. We think by doing this, we can bring those red bars and blue bars in closer alignment. However, as I mentioned before, if a project provides a top-tier public benefit in either of these four categories, they will be exempt from providing other public benefits. And so a project would really have many options to earn the right to build their mapped FAR. They could handpick from a number of small tier 1 public benefits from all the four categories to earn the right to build up to their mapped FAR, or they could provide slightly more substantial public benefits from only 2 categories, or a project may choose to go all in on one category and provide a tier 4 public benefit and get all their mapped FAR for providing the public benefit. And again, I would also sort of mention again that you really need to provide public benefits that add up to the amount of FAR that is being requested, which is different from how it works today, where it's either 0 points or 100 points and there's no in between. So in this case, if a project chooses to build more, they have to earn more of that FAR. But if they don't want to build their entire mapped FAR, they don't have to provide public benefits to justify all of their mapped FAR, just the amount of FAR that they are asking to be approved as a part of the project. We did do financial analysis of these public benefits. We estimated the cost of providing existing public benefits and the new benefits we are proposing and compared them. We also created different development prototypes across various parts of the county and reviewed along with our real estate consultant what it would mean for projects to provide this new system of public benefits, whether they're a project in a market like Bethesda or Fairland, and everything in between, to really make sure that these projects penciled across the different parts of the county where these zones are applied. We've continued to include and expand the option for payment in lieu. However, it is preferred that public benefits are constructed by developers as a first choice. But there are areas where a payment in lieu might be more suitable. For example, if the public benefit is located off-site, or if the sector plan contemplates the creation of large-scale facilities, we think public benefits could be pooled together to provide those facilities. And we are proposing a system in which the payment would be based on a per square foot basis and adjusted annually based on a local regional construction cost index, so that payment can keep up with inflation. And we think this will create, again, a sense of scale and a sense of proportionality, and those individual payments could be pooled together to create larger amenities as recommended within a sector plan. And recent plans like Downtown Bethesda sector plan have created this idea of additional, Excel to build density, which goes beyond the mapped FAR. In the case of Bethesda, for example, projects can make a park impact payment to earn more, to buy essentially density from the Bethesda overlay zone. We think this is a policy that will continue to be used in the future. So we want to make sure the public benefit system has a way to work with this policy. So we are recommending that each sector plan really consider whether they want to allocate enough heights to parcels where there might be some extra room beyond the mapped FAR, and whether there is a bank of density that should be created for offering to Excel to build as Excel-able density in exchange for public benefits. If that is the case for a sector plan, a developer would be expected to provide a formal request along with their application to receive additional density from that density bank, and we would have to ask them to clearly articulate how the proposed public benefit would provide an extraordinary benefit to the community, and it is not something that is covered in the menu that we just shared with you. And they would have to provide some sense of what the cost of providing this public benefit is for sake of transparency. We as planning staff would then evaluate all that information and make a recommendation to the board whether that request for additional Excel to build density beyond the mapped FAR is appropriate to approve or not. So we've thrown a lot at you so far. We have more to come, but we wanted to create a pause here and really compare what we just showed you as a proposed system to how it compares to the system that exists today, because we think that's a helpful comparison to help understand the type of changes we are proposing.
Okay, so in the next couple of slides, we're going to be doing this side-by-side comparison. On the left side is within our existing system, the list of our many public benefits, the 36 in total. On the right side, what we are proposing in this new structure is a total of 13 public benefits nestled within the 4 main categories that align with our county priorities. On the left side of your screen, it's showing how the current CR guidelines evaluate points. It's a point-based system essentially, and so there's a calculation which determines how many public benefit points are required from certain categories. This calculation has a very low threshold, so more often than not, the project is going to result in requiring 100 public benefit points from 4 categories. It's sort of the maximum amount within our CR guidelines. And so on the right side of our system, as Atul mentioned, we are proposing to switch to an FAR-based evaluation system. And so each public benefit will have a tier with assigned FAR. And if your project is proposing a total of 3 FAR, we would be looking at public benefits that would be commensurate with that FAR proposed. So the lower FAR you're proposing, the less public benefits and the less intense public benefits that could be delivered. And as the intensity of the project grows and the FAR grows, so does the intensity of the public benefit. And so with this project, we are also tackling the topic of BLTs and TDRs. BLTs stand for building lot terminations, and TDRs stand for transfer of development rights. These 2 items are both intended to help preserve land in the upper areas of our county for agricultural use. And they are both current public benefit categories. However, our current system has a requirement for BLTs to be purchased for optional method development projects in the CR and the LSC zone. So ultimately, the BLTs have been more chosen and have delivered more often, and the TDRs have not because there is no requirement to do so. What makes a BLT payment a little bit more easier to do is a payment can just be made directly to the Agricultural Land Preservation Fund. However, to purchase a TDR, one must negotiate that privately with the property owners directly. So what we're proposing in the new system on the right side is to remove BLTs and TDRs from a public benefit entirely and make it a code requisite for optional method projects within the CR and LSC zone. And so what this means is that the requirement would be that you could either purchase a BLT or a TDR to meet that requirement. We would maintain the ability for the Ag Land Preservation Fund to receive the BLT payments, but we would also expand that to allow the fund to also accept payments for the purchase of TDRs, so we can make that process a little bit more even and easier. And in doing all of this, essentially, we are allowing the CR and the LSC zones to become receiving areas for TDRs, which is a bit different situation than it currently stands.
And the one thing I would add to this is currently the purchase of TDRs does come with a density bonus, and we would continue to maintain that highest level density bonus, which is 4,400 square feet per TDR. So if you do purchase TDRs, you would also be able to tap into that density bonus, which we think would be a great way to reinvigorate this program that, quite frankly, has lagged through the county in the past 10 to 20 years. So that was kind of like a side-by-side comparison. We also thought hard about how the new policy should really be applied to each of the 4 zones and whether it should be applied to each of the 4 zones. So now we're going to go zone by zone and share our recommendations as to how we think this policy would work across the 4 zones. So we'll start with the EOF zone first.
Great. So the EOF zone, this stands for the Employment Office Zone. This zone is typically applied to larger properties along our growth corridors. Some examples of those properties are shown on your screen. And as you can see, these are developed with order style, Class B and C office buildings, light industrial buildings, and small businesses. This is an order type of development. It's really struggled in the current market conditions, and many of these properties have not really seen much reinvestment.
So before we check in and talk about the EOF zoning profile, please allow me to explain how do we make it happen. So basically, we develop the zoning profile for each of 4 zones. We utilize a GIS approach to strengthen the rationale and support the decision making. So I want to highlight this involved geospatial analysis focused on the parcel level, which help us understand how each zoning categories operates in terms of their FAR ranges, established thresholds, and frequency of FAR categories. So let's talk about EOF data effect. So of course, all EOF parcels, the typical parcel size is constantly 1 acre, the FAR threshold ranging from 0.25 to 3. The threshold of option method is 1 FAR. When we close look at the frequency of FAR categories at the bar chart below, the 0.75 FAR categories encompasses the largest number of EOF parcels, and this falls below over established threshold 1 FAR. So such a condition is vividly telling us that the majority of EOF parcels, their development potentials that limited to the standard method, plus only 1 EOF project has utilized the option method to gain the bonus density since 2010. So we believe removing EOF from the listed zone that requires public benefits is reasonable and efficient. So I'm passing to my colleague to keep talking about the recommendations for this zone.
Okay, so thank you, Lue. Based on the data and everything that we've analyzed, our recommendations are based on some of the following takeaways. 1, in speaking with our sector planners, our master planners, this zone is no longer being applied when new sector plans are under review. Secondly, as Lue alluded to in the earlier slide, the one project that was approved in the EOF zone was just recently rezoned to CR in its sector plan process. And then lastly, I think most importantly, is that most of the properties that are zoned EOF are not zoned with a sufficient FAR to even consider optional method. So all this combined with the fact that this current type of asset on the property is struggling in the market, we are recommending that the EOF zone be removed from the optional method development process. In doing so, we would then allow the properties to develop to their full mapped FAR through the standard method process, and we would require the site plan to be required above 0.5 FAR, so our code requisites are still being met.
Thank you, Grace. We'll now shift gears to the life sciences zone. And as the name suggests, this zone predominantly has hospitals, life science buildings, medical office buildings, and some universities and academic campuses within it. So Lue, if you want to talk a little bit about the data behind the zone.
Sure, thanks, Sator. So this is LSC zoning profile. The LSC FAR values are ranging between 0.5 to 2. Parcels within this zone are typically larger, ranging from 3 to 4 acres in size. only one single parcel has an FAR that falls at a lower boundary of over option method threshold 0.5 FAR. All the others exceed this figure and are considered for development under the option method. However, we haven't received any approved projects since 2010. So we delve into the realistic conditions of LLC and discover that parcels eligible for development under the option method are fully constructed, such as Montgomery College and Adventist Hospital. So what are the remaining parcels? They are all covered by the Great Seneca Master Plan Overlay Zone, where the Mid-County team is currently working on. So we believe that public benefits will be effectively regulated within this overlay zone that could align with the entire process of Great Seneca Master Plan.
Thank you, Louise. So yeah, that's an important distinction too, and I'll just sort of put some emphasis on it. You know, the Great Seneca Plan is being updated as we speak by the Mid-County Planning Team. They are proposing an overlay zone as a part of that plan, and we think that that overlay zone is probably the best way to regulate public benefits for those properties. Outside of those properties, there's only 3 other parcels, and these parcels have either already been built out or have a very low amount of zoning potential or binding elements that limit the development on those sites. So these 3 properties outside of the overlay zone are likely to not change much in the coming decades. The overlay zone itself is being created within the Great Seneca Plan area to attract and retain life science development and incentivize the production of housing in a mixed-use sort of community setting. We've worked hand in hand with that team to make sure that the benefits, public benefits that they require for development within the overlay zone are aligned with the 4 categories that we shared with you. So in light of all that, we think that regulating public benefits through the overlay zone makes a lot of sense. And we are recommending that those 3 other properties that I talked about be exempt from providing public benefits under the optional method of development, but we continue to require a site plan for those projects above a 0.5 FAR, so code requisites can be met. So again, we're trying to streamline and bring things as close to by right as possible in these 2 zones, LSC and EOF, because they haven't really seen much optional method development, and we think that's a positive amendment to make to the program.
Okay, on to the CR zone, stands for commercial residential. This zone is typically applied within our central business districts and along major metro line stations, like along the Red Line. And CR development can be delivered in a variety of ways. So one of the images on your screen, Marriott headquarters, is located in downtown Bethesda. So we can typically see high-rise buildings with ground floor retail and residential and/or office above. But as we move into the mid and upper areas of the county, CR projects through the optional method process could deliver us lower scale multi-family residential buildings with ground floor retail, and also like up in Germantown, we can see there's townhouse development through a CR optional method project, which also includes a retail center.
Okay, in the CR zone, their FAR values are wider than those in EOF and LLC, ranging from 0.5 to 8, but the parcels are commonly less than 1 acre size. So the bar charts illustrate that, aside from the 0.5 FAR threshold, 98% of CR parcels qualify for the optional method under our incentive policy. So, and the CR zone is a listed zone where we have received the most approvals, with 53 projects approved under the optional method of development. So I'm passing to Grace, keep talking about CRT.
Up next, commercial residential town. This zone is typically applied on the edges of central business districts and along our growth corridors. and along smaller transit stops such as bus stops or major BRT stops. What we did notice in our analysis was that this zone has been applied perhaps in larger properties with larger FARs than originally intended, but some examples of CRT development are shown on the bottom of your screen. As you can see, these are typically lower to mid-rise multifamily buildings, typically sometimes with ground floor retail.
In the CRT zone, once again, it features a FAR range of 0.25 to 4.75. The typical parcel size is less than 1 acre. The option method threshold for CRT is 1 FAR. The bar chart tells us that predominant number of CRT parcels adhere to the standard method. Since 2010, we have approved a total of 13 projects that employ the option method of development in the CRT zone. So such combined conditions offer a valuable insight that's suggesting to lower down the option method threshold to 0.5 FAR, which will provide a more tailored recommendations for both CR and CRT zones collectively.
Thanks, Luwei. So the recommendations that are combined for CR and CRT zone, again, with the major takeaway that Luwei just said, most of our CRT zones are zoned at FAR of 1 or lower. So we are recommending to equalize the threshold for both of these zones at greater than 0.5. And then we are recommending that we keep the tiered framework that we currently have, which is standard method, and then up to FAR, and then potentially additional acceptable densities based on sector plans, and then provide those public benefits as we've described herein today. And then with this, we would be allowing master plans the flexibility to modify those public benefits through the sector planning process.
And the one thing to note here too is that even though we are making the CR and CRT thresholds the same, if a CRT parcel has a lower amount of FAR that they're trying to build because of lower zoning, they would be expected to provide fewer public benefits than a CR project that is asking to be approved for a higher density. So even though we are equalizing the threshold for optional method, we think that we would still have a way to maintain some proportionality between the public benefits being requested of projects and the density being built upon them. So we're getting to the last bits here for the next few slides. What we'll do is we'll give you a high-level overview of what the public benefits under each of these 4 categories look like. So under housing, there are 3 distinct public benefits being proposed. The first one is quite similar to what it is today, where you can get public benefits for providing MPDUs or affordable housing units greater than what is required by the code or the sector plan that is applicable to the property. We will continue to incentivize the delivery of larger family-sized units, which means 3 bedrooms or greater for both market rate and affordable units for both rent and sale as well. For apartments and multifamily buildings, this would be 3 bedrooms or greater. For townhouses and single-family buildings, this would be 4 bedrooms or greater. And then a newer option here would be to provide to earn FAR by providing deeper levels of affordability as an average AMI. So if a project provided a certain amount of MPDUs at 60% average AMI versus the current 70% requirement by the MPDU law, they would be eligible for earning some FAR as well.
Okay, so for the environmental resilience category, we're looking at 3 public benefit categories. The one on your left of your screen is describing energy. So in this one, we're looking at 2 different things. We're looking at, first off, exceeding energy efficiency standards. This is actually something that's currently recommended in the CR guidelines. It's a current public benefit category, and this is actually being employed within our Bethesda sector plan as a requirement. And so we've kept this and we've tiered the system with our new structure. And we've worked with the Department of Permitting Services, their sustainability division, in creating all of the environmental resilience categories. Secondly, within the energy category, we're looking at projects that will use and or generate renewable energy. And so this is towards our climate action goal of net zero. In the green building category, this is one that really isn't existing or available within our current public benefit process. And so we are recommending to provide or let projects achieve FAR through meeting the alternative compliance through LEED certification. And so the tiered system would allow projects to achieve FAR for LEED Silver, LEED Gold, LEED Platinum. And then in the sustainable sites category, we're looking for projects that would be delivering sustainable elements in their design. And so we're looking for things such as biophilic design, enhanced green roof, bird-friendly design, the utilization of pervious pavement, and perhaps adaptively reusing a building where appropriate. In the infrastructure for compact growth category, we're looking for offsite improvements, public facilities, and grid and trail extensions. Within offsite improvements, we're looking for projects that would be providing streetscape improvements or bicycle improvements offsite. We're also considering offsite stormwater facility upgrades or other floodplain management upgrades. Within the public facility category, this is something that is very similar to the CR guidelines currently, where if a project is dedicating and or constructing a major public facility, they would be able to receive FAR for that. This particular section is something where we would be looking towards the sector plans to tailor. So when they are developing their sector plan, they could really be specifying if there's a particular major street or a certain facility such as a BRT or other transit station that would be necessary. And then in the last category for grid and trail extensions, we're looking for projects that would be delivering a design that would help contribute to compact growth. So in some of the lower tiers, we're looking for project designs that would be reducing curb cuts. And then we would be looking towards, in the larger projects, those that would be delivering a public street that would provide through block connectivity and contribute to the larger network. And as that scales up, we would be looking for a subdivision that would be creating a street grid that would also be contributing to the larger network.
Thank you, Grace. And then for amenities for complete communities, we have a public benefit for art and placemaking where projects can receive incentive density for providing artistic elements in projects, installing public art reviewed by the art review panel, or in collaboration with urban partnerships, arts and entertainment districts, and local nonprofits. So expanding the groups that one can partner with to deliver public art. But we're also looking at programming like farmers markets and concerts. If an applicant is willing to sponsor those for a set amount of time, they could receive some incentive density for that. And then as you move to the higher tiers of participation, providing affordable housing for artists or providing spaces for the creation and exhibition of art like theaters, art galleries, etc., would be eligible for public benefit. So for example, if a project included a 20,000 square foot theater or an art gallery within it, that would be considered a tier 4 public benefit, in which case that project would not be expected to provide other public benefits. We will continue to incentivize the provision of retail and neighborhood services through the neighborhood services and mixed use category. Under the great public realm, we will incentivize the provision of improvements to existing parks or the creation of new privately owned public spaces or the creation of parkland that is dedicated to our parks department. And depending on how big the space that is being improved or created is, you would be able to request approval of different tiers of density. And then under design excellence, as I mentioned previously, we've come up with a list of 10 strategies and also a certification system that is an option to pursue. And as projects employ more of these strategies from the list, some of them are very simple, like creating a building with a base, middle, and top. Some are more complex, like lining all the parking with active uses. But as you check off more things on this list, you'll be able to request more incentive density to be approved as a part of your application. So that, in a nutshell, provides an overview of the various public benefits within the 4 categories. And again, as I mentioned, we looked at a lot at financial feasibility for including these within projects. We applied it to different project types, and in different markets. And we considered the financial feasibility of providing these public benefits that we are proposing versus what's existing on the menu to make sure that that feasibility maintained itself through the update. And here are some of the examples of the prototypes that we developed. We won't go into details, but you can see we've looked at high-rise concrete construction to wood over concrete, sort of podium apartment buildings, to projects that could include townhouses and 2-over-2 style development. And coming back to this image, there are multiple ways to earn that incentive density. You can do a mixed bag of smaller public benefits across all 4 categories, or you can focus on 2 different categories and provide slightly more significant public benefits, or you can pick a top-tier public benefit from either of those 4 categories and provide that and be exempt from providing other public benefits. We think the system is more proportional. We think the system is more flexible, and we will eliminate a lot of confusing formulas and complicated sort of compliance procedures through this. And we think the system, most importantly, will maintain sort of the balance between cost of development and the value of incentive density and align the delivery of public benefits with the key county policy goals that we are trying to achieve. As next steps, as I mentioned, we are going to the planning board for working sessions in June and July. Public testimony is welcome during those working sessions. The dates of those can be found on our project website. In the fall, we hope to get to the county council for their review. And once all the reviewing is done, we will then turn to creating a zoning text amendment in the winter and then look at implementing the updating the implementation guidelines and applying the new system in a phased rollout manner that makes sense. We do have a great website that has a lot of this information. We will email all these slides to the attendees tomorrow, and also upload the recording of this to the website for your future reference. And at this point, we'll pause and see if people have questions. We still have 15 minutes, and we are happy to stay as long as people want us to stay to answer the questions. Any questions or thoughts?
Tool, this is Jody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you and see you.
Grace, nice to see you again. Let me ask maybe kind of a real threshold question. Of the 36 categories you had, are they gone, or are they just shifted into the 13 categories and kind of renamed? And I'll just pick one and use it as an example. Building reuse is kind of a nice, simple one. Is that no longer something you would get a pat on the back and 8 points for, or is it found just in the environmental resilience category now?
A little bit of both, Jody. I think some of them truly are gone, but some of them, like the adaptive reuse, is still within the design excellence criteria. Things like, for example, a cooled roof, that has become a part of the base construction code requirements with the recent updates that the county is in the process of adopting. So we are eliminating some of those things. So I think it's a mixed bag, but not everything is just being cast away. The ones that made sense, we've continued to carry forth in the new system. And most importantly, we are trying to make the new system a lot more about performance-based measurements versus individual things. To give you an example, a person might have to do a cooled roof to earn a LEED certification or achieve a certain amount of energy performance. So some of these things are called a different name. Some of these are being discontinued because they've become a part of base code or are no longer considered a meaningful public benefit, but it's a real mixed bag. I hope that answers your question to some degree.
Yes, thank you.
Yep. Any other thoughts or questions from people on the call? Not seeing any comments in the chat either. Jody, do you have more questions?
Well, can I try again? If I want to see if there's anybody else who wants to speak. To what extent is the current thinking in the minds of the reviewers of the pending sketch plan applications you got now? And I say it in this context, the city of Gaithersburg is redoing their zoning ordinance, and they've told us that after July 15th, when they introduce their new zoning ordinance, they are going to begin evaluating all projects under that new ordinance under the assumption that it's going to be adopted by their mayor and council. My reaction is this is a major change in terms of how we used to look at things. And I'm thinking, my recollection is you attended that White Flint Fire Station meeting I had for a multifamily building there. And I'm sure that my architects had done all their work kind of getting their points on the old system. And this is, I mean, everything's going in the wastebasket and they're starting over again, apparently.
Yeah, so we will definitely not do what Gaithersburg is doing in this case. We recognize this is a comprehensive update. So our current thinking is two things. First of all, none of this gets enacted until we go through the planning board, the PHP committee, and then a full council vote. And after that, once we have actually written out a ZTA, and the ZTA gets reviewed and approved and adopted. So we are all of that in itself is taking us into 2025 easily.
Yeah, sure.
And even once that gets adopted, our current thinking is that just like we did with the old zoning code, changing to the new zoning code, we would have some sort of an opt-in period. You know, a year, 2 years, we don't know exactly what that would be, where people would actually have the option to continue to come under the old version of the policy or use this more streamlined and we think more sort of usable version of the policy. But everybody would have that option during the opt-in period. And then at some point, there'll be a sunset date, at which point all the projects will shift to this. And once this policy is instated, the new master plans will automatically start using this policy from day one as they are created. So it'll be a more incremental rollout.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, my compliments on the thoroughness of your work and the creativity of it. It's more than I can keep up with, but it's certainly very interesting.
Thank you. And you know, we're truly trying to maintain some level of objectivity and rationale here. And it is a lot of information, and I'll make sure I send the full pack of slides to everybody who was on the call tonight so that we can make sure you have that. And if you have further questions, once you review that, please feel free to reach out to me or Grace or Louie, and we'll be happy to answer any questions and continue the discussion. But does anybody have other thoughts or questions? If not, we would like to thank you, everybody, for taking the time. And I know there was a comment here that in the chat that said this was hard to understand for non-planners. We totally understand that, but if you want to have a more sort of broad general discussion around this, please feel free to reach out to me. We'll set up a time to talk to you and help explain this in a way that makes sense. But really, truly do thank everybody for taking the time on an evening and sort of sitting through this, and we'll send the slides out tomorrow, put the video on the website, and look forward to continuing the conversation. So
thank you
all. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night.